Torrential rain lashed against the thin glass of my apartment window, sounding like a barrage of miniature bullets seeking entry. Every impact served as a stark reminder of just how vulnerable we truly were. In her second-hand crib, my daughter, Emma, was only 6 months old and slept in peaceful ignorance. She was blissfully unaware of the menacing stack of overdue bills piling up on our unstable kitchen table, or the eviction notice that sat ominously beneath them. I rested my forehead against the cold window pane, watching the city lights smear into abstract shapes through the tears welling in my eyes. The crushing burden of single motherhood bore down on my shoulders, feeling even heavier than the humid, damp air that filled our cramped living space. "We will find a way to make this work," I whispered softly to Emma, although the promise rang hollow, even to my own ears. I had been working double shifts at Bellini's, a high-end Italian restaurant in the city center, barely scraping together enough cash to keep a roof over our heads. My fingers were raw and chapped from endless hours of washing dishes and scrubbing surfaces. My feet throbbed with a dull ache from standing all day, and the dark, bruised circles beneath my eyes had seemingly become a permanent fixture of my face. Yet, looking at her, I knew Emma was worth it. She was worth absolutely everything. My mind drifted back to the night I met Marco. He was tall, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to contain all the secrets of the cosmos. He had swept into my life like a storm for 3 whirlwind months, only to vanish without a trace, leaving behind nothing but a shattered heart. And, as I would find out weeks later, a child growing within me. I had no phone number for him, no physical address, and not even a surname I could verify was genuine. To me, he was just Marco from Naples, a man who spoke of vague business opportunities and family ties with a glint in his eye that I was far too naive to identify as dangerous. A sudden, violent crack of thunder startled Emma from her sleep, her sharp cries piercing the quiet of our small apartment. I rushed to the crib, scooping her fragile body into my arms. "Sure, baby girl, Mommy is here," I cooed, rocking her back and forth gently. "Mommy is always right here." The rain continued to hammer against the glass as I hummed a soft lullaby, watching Emma's eyelids grow heavy once again. She had his eyes, deep, dark, and possessing a wisdom that seemed far beyond her few months of life. Sometimes, when she looked up at me, I could almost see Marco staring back, and my heart would wring itself out with a disorienting blend of profound love and lingering resentment. The following morning arrived grey and dreary, perfectly mirroring my internal mood as I bundled Emma up in her warm clothes for the walk to Mrs. Chen's apartment. Mrs. Chen, an elderly neighbor, watched Emma while I went to work, charging me significantly less than any professional daycare center would. Her generosity was one of the few lifelines keeping me from drowning. "You look exhausted, Sophia," Mrs. Chen observed as she took Emma from my arms. "You look even more tired than usual." I forced a weak smile onto my face. "It was just another late shift," I said. "Thank you again for watching her." "This baby is never any trouble," she replied, bouncing Emma gently in her arms. "But you need to take care of yourself as well." I kissed Emma's forehead, breathing in her sweet, innocent scent before reluctantly turning to head out the door. I told her I would be back to pick her up at 11 o'clock. When I arrived at Bellini's, the place was already bustling with activity. The lunch crowd filled the elegant dining room with a cacophony of chatter and the delicate clinking of fine china. I slipped in through the back service entrance, tying my black apron securely around my waist and pulling my hair back into a severe, tight bun. In my role as a server, I was effectively invisible to most of the patrons. I was simply another body moving with mechanical efficiency between the tables, refilling water glasses and delivering steaming plates of pasta. Mia, another server, caught my attention as she passed by with a tray of drinks. "Table 12 just got seated," she informed me. "They look like big spenders." I nodded, grabbing my notepad and making my way toward the section I had been assigned. Table 12 was situated in the corner, partially hidden from view by one of the restaurant's ornate architectural columns. I affixed my professional smile to my face, rounding the pillar to greet my new guests. "Good afternoon, and welcome to Bellini's," I began, but the words died in my throat before I could finish. 4 men dressed in impeccably tailored suits occupied the table, but my gaze locked instantly onto only one of them. Sitting with his back against the wall, commanding a clear and unobstructed view of the entire restaurant, was Marco. He looked exactly as I remembered him, yet somehow even more imposing than before. His dark hair was styled to perfection, and his jawline was sharp enough to cut glass. The suit he wore likely cost more than my rent for the entire year. But it was his eyes, those same eyes that had haunted my dreams for over a year, that froze me where I stood. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. I felt the blood drain from my face, my hand gripping the notepad so tightly that my knuckles turned bone white. Did he recognize me? Would he even remember the waitress he had spent those nights with before vanishing into thin air? My heart hammered violently against my ribs, and I offered a silent prayer that he wouldn't notice the tremors running through my hands. His gaze swept over me, lingering for just a fraction of a second too long before shifting to one of his companions. If he did recognize me, he gave absolutely no indication of it. The knot of fear in my stomach loosened slightly, only to be replaced by a hollow, aching sensation. Of course, he wouldn't remember. I had been nothing more than a fleeting distraction to him. "I will have the Barolo, the 2010 vintage," he said, his thick Italian accent washing over me like a tidal wave of memories. "And whatever my associates prefer." I nodded mechanically, taking down the rest of their orders while studiously avoiding any direct eye contact with Marco. My mind was racing. What was he doing here? Bellini's was an upscale establishment, certainly, but it hardly seemed like the type of place I would expect to find him. And the men with him, they carried themselves with that same dangerous confidence, their eyes constantly scanning the room for threats. As I turned to walk away, I heard Marco's voice ring out again. "Wait." I froze in my tracks, turning back toward the table with agonizing slowness. "Have we met before?" he asked, tilting his head slightly as he studied my face. The other men at the table exchanged subtle glances. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly feeling like sandpaper. "I don't believe so, sir," I lied. His eyes narrowed slightly, and I could see the gears turning as he processed my face, searching the archives of his memory. "You look very familiar," he insisted. "I have worked here for almost a year," I managed to say, keeping my voice steadier than I actually felt. "Perhaps you have dined with us before." He smiled then, a slow, predatory curling of his lips that failed to reach his eyes. "Perhaps." I escaped into the safety of the kitchen, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst right through my chest. Marco was here. The father of my child was sitting less than 50 feet away, completely oblivious to the fact that his daughter existed. The urge to flee was overwhelming. I could call Mrs. Chen, grab Emma, and just disappear. But where would we go? With what money? "Are you okay?" Mia asked, noticing my visible distress as I leaned heavily against the wall. "You look like you have seen a ghost." "Something like that," I murmured in response. The rest of their meal passed in a blur of high anxiety. I delivered their food, refilled their wine glasses, and cleared their plates with robotic efficiency, doing everything in my power to avoid Marco's gaze. Yet, I could feel his eyes on me, tracking my every movement across the restaurant floor. By the time they finally requested the check, my nerves were frayed to the breaking point. I placed the leather folder on the table, praying silently that they would pay quickly and leave. Marco reached for it, and his fingers brushed against mine. The brief contact sent an electric jolt shooting through my body, bringing memories of those same hands on my skin rushing back uninvited. "Thank you for your service," he said, sliding several large bills into the folder without even glancing at the total. "Keep the change." I nodded my thanks and turned to leave, but his next word stopped me cold. "Sophia." Hearing my name on his lips made me freeze instantly. He remembered. "It is Sophia, isn't it?" Marco continued, his voice low and smooth as silk. I turned back slowly, finally meeting his gaze head-on. "Yes. I never forget a beautiful face," he said, the corner of his mouth lifting in a half-smile. "Especially one that has haunted me for so long." His companions shifted uncomfortably in their seats, and one of them checked his watch with pointed impatience. "We should go, boss," the largest of them muttered. "We have that meeting." The word echoed in my mind, the pieces of the puzzle suddenly falling into place. The expensive suits, the watchful eyes, The deference of his companions, Marco wasn't just some businessman with family connections. He was something else entirely. Marco waved a dismissive hand at the man, his eyes never leaving mine. "What time do you finish work today, Sophia?" "I am afraid I am quite busy," I replied, my voice barely rising above a whisper. "That was not what I asked," he said. His tone remained pleasant, but there was undeniable steel beneath the surface. 11, I answered automatically, and then immediately regretted it. "I will have a car waiting," he stated. It wasn't a request, it was a command. Before I could voice a protest, they were rising from the table. Marco's companions formed a protective phalanx around him as they moved toward the exit. One man remained slightly behind, slipping me a small card with nothing but a phone number embossed in gold. "If there is any problem," he said quietly, before following the others out. I stood there frozen, the card burning between my fingers like a hot coal. The remainder of my shift passed in a daze, my mind racing with 1,000 possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. Should I run? Should I call the police? But what would I tell them? That the father of my child, who didn't know about her existence, had asked to meet me after work? By the time 11 o'clock arrived, I had made my decision. I would face Marco. I would tell him I wanted nothing from him and make it abundantly clear that my life, our lives, were better without his interference. I changed out of my uniform in the employee bathroom. The fancy blouse and skirt I had worn to work suddenly seemed hopelessly inadequate for what lay ahead. As promised, a sleek black car was idling outside the restaurant service entrance. The same large man from earlier held the rear door open for me without saying a word. Every survival instinct I possessed screamed at me to turn and run in the opposite direction. But where would I go? Marco had found me once, he could easily find me again. It was better to face this now, on my own terms. The interior of the car was upholstered in plush leather, and the privacy divider was already raised between the passenger cabin and the driver. We rode in silence through the city streets, the streetlights blurring past the tinted windows. Finally, the car slowed to a stop outside an exclusive high-rise building overlooking the river. "This way," my escort said, leading me through a private entrance where the security staff nodded deferentially as we passed. The elevator required a key card to access the penthouse level. My stomach lurched as we began to ascend, partly from the rapid rise of the elevator and partly from the knowledge that with each passing floor, I was being carried further away from Emma. Mrs. Chen would be worried by now. "May I use your phone?" I asked the man. "I need to let my babysitter know I will be late." The man regarded me for a moment before extracting a cell phone from his jacket pocket. "Make it quick," he grunted. I dialed Mrs. Chen's number with trembling fingers, assuring her that I was fine and would be there soon to pick up Emma. I deliberately avoided giving any specific details, acutely aware of the man listening to every word I spoke. When I handed the phone back to him, I noticed his expression had shifted slightly, a flicker of curiosity crossing his otherwise stoic features. The elevator doors slid open directly into a stunning penthouse apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city spread out below like a carpet of shimmering stars. The furnishings were minimal but obviously incredibly expensive, and the space was larger than any home I had ever set foot in. And there, standing by the windows with a glass of amber liquid in his hand, was Marco. "Leave us," he commanded, without turning around. My escort retreated into the elevator, disappearing behind the closing doors. For a long, tense moment, neither of us spoke. I remained standing near the elevator, unwilling to move any closer. Further into his domain. "You disappeared," Marco finally spoke, his voice resonating through the vast, open space. "One morning, you were simply gone without leaving a single word behind." I almost laughed at the sheer irony of it. "I could easily make the same claim regarding you." He pivoted around then, and I was struck by the raw intensity burning in his eyes. "I had business matters to attend to. By the time I returned, you had vanished." "Business?" I repeated, my voice dull and flat. "Is that what you are calling it?" "My work is complicated." He placed his glass down on a nearby table and took a deliberate step toward me. "However, I never forgot you, Sophia. What is it that you want from me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice more stable than I actually felt inside. He observed me for a long, stretching moment. You have changed. A lot can happen in the span of 15 months. His eyes narrowed as he mentioned the specific time frame. Yes, I suppose it can. The atmosphere between us seemed to crackle with tension as he moved closer, every step calculated. I forced myself to stand my ground, even though my heart was racing against my ribs. You have a child, he said abruptly. It was not a question. The blood drained from my face. How did you? You called for a babysitter, he answered, gesturing toward the spot where his man had been standing earlier. Antonio hears everything. I swallowed hard, my mind spinning. Yes, I have responsibilities now. I really should get back to them. A husband. The query was casual, yet his eyes had turned into hard flint. No, the child's father. Then I hesitated, torn between telling the truth and self-preservation. Not in the picture. Marco was close enough now that I could smell his cologne, that same scent that had once saturated my bedsheets. How old is your child, Sophia? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken implication. I knew in that instant that my answer would irrevocably alter the course of our lives. 6 months, I whispered. His expression did not shift, but something changed in his eyes, a calculation, a dawning realization. Boy or girl? Girl. Marco nodded slowly, as if he were confirming something he had already suspected. I think, he said with care, that we have a great deal to discuss. The world felt as though it tilted beneath my feet. In my desperate bid to protect Emma, had I made a terrible error? The truth lay exposed between us now, impossible to retract. I thought of my daughter, sleeping peacefully at Mrs. Chen's apartment, completely unaware that her entire universe was about to transform. I should go, I said, turning toward the elevator doors. It is late and my daughter. Our daughter, Marco corrected, his words freezing me in my tracks, needs her mother and her father. My heart hammered violently against my ribs. The words hung suspended in the air between us. Our daughter. Spoken so casually, yet so monumental in their implications. You cannot just walk into our lives and claim her, I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to remain calm. You do not know anything about her, or about us. Marco's expression remained unreadable, but something flickered in his dark eyes. Then enlighten me. This is not a conversation we should be having right now. I need to get back to her. He nodded once, decisively. We will go together. No, I said too quickly, panic rising in my throat. The thought of Marco seeing Emma, of him entering our small, shabby apartment, sent waves of anxiety crashing through me. That is not necessary. It was not a suggestion. His voice was soft, but it left no room for argument. He pulled out his phone, tapping the screen a single time. Antonio will drive us. Marco, please. I hated the pleading note that entered my voice. This is all happening too fast. He paused, studying me for a long moment. 15 months, Sophia. I have missed 15 months of my daughter's life already. I will not miss another minute. The elevator doors slid open, and Antonio materialized as if he had been waiting just on the other side. Marco gestured for me to enter first, his hand coming to rest lightly at the small of my back. The touch was gentle, yet unmistakably possessive. The ride to Mrs. Chen's apartment passed in tense silence. I stared out the window, my mind racing as I tried to formulate a plan, some way to shield Emma from whatever complicated, dangerous world Marco inhabited. But with each passing minute, control slipped further from my grasp. When we pulled up outside Mrs. Chen's building, I turned to Marco. Wait here, please. Let me explain things to my neighbor first. He considered this request, then nodded. 5 minutes. I practically ran up the 3 flights of stairs to Mrs. Chen's apartment, my breath coming in short gasps that had nothing to do with the physical exertion. The elderly woman opened her door at my first knock, concern etched deeply across her face. Sophia. I was worried. It is so late. I am sorry, I said, stepping inside and immediately moving to where Emma slept in the portable crib I had set up in Mrs. Chen's living room. My daughter's peaceful face sent a surge of protectiveness through me, Something unexpected came up. Mrs. Chen followed my gaze, her expression softening. She has been an angel, as always. I gathered Emma's belongings with trembling hands, trying to think clearly. Mrs. Chen, I need to ask you something. The man, Emma's father, has found us. Her eyes widened. Is this good news or bad? I do not know yet, I admitted carefully, lifting my sleeping daughter into my arms. But I think things are going to change. She patted my arm sympathetically. You call me if you need anything, day or night. I thanked her, securing Emma in her carrier before making my way back downstairs. Each step felt like I was moving toward an inevitable collision, a future I could not see but could sense looming before me. Marco stood beside the car, his tall figure illuminated by a nearby streetlight. When he saw us approach, something changed in his posture, a subtle straightening, an alertness that had not been there before. His eyes fixed on the small bundle in my arms with an intensity that made me instinctively hold Emma closer. Is that her? He asked, his voice barely audible. I nodded, unable to find words as he stepped forward. For a moment, we stood in silence on the sidewalk, this strange tableau of a family that had never been together before. Marco reached out, his hand hovering uncertainly before he carefully, reverently pulled back the blanket to reveal Emma's sleeping face. His sharp intake of breath was the only sound on the quiet street. She has my mother's nose, he whispered, a note of wonder in his voice that I had never heard before. And my eyes. Emma stirred slightly, her tiny fingers flexing before she settled again. Marco watched, transfixed, as if she had performed some miraculous feat. What is her name? He asked, still staring at her. Emma. Emma Rossi, he repeated, testing the name. I don't know your last name, I said, blinking in surprise. A shadow passed over his features. Now you do. He looked up at me, his expression hardening. She is a Rossi. My blood. The possessiveness in his voice sent a chill through me. Before I could respond, he was opening the car door, gesturing for me to get in. We should get her home. It is cold out here. The drive to my apartment was mercifully short. I kept my eyes on Emma, avoiding Marco's gaze as he sat unnaturally still beside me, his attention fixed on our daughter. When we arrived, I hesitated before leading him upstairs. My apartment suddenly seemed shamefully inadequate. The peeling paint, the second-hand furniture, the dampness that never quite went away. It is not much, I said defensively as I unlocked the door. But it is clean and safe. Marco said nothing as he followed me inside, his eyes taking in every detail of our small home. I carried Emma to her crib, gently laying her down without waking her. When I turned back, Marco stood in the doorway of the bedroom, his imposing figure seeming to fill the entire space. This is where my daughter sleeps, he asked, his voice controlled but with an undercurrent of something dangerous. Yes, I replied, lifting my chin. I have done the best I can. He moved past me to stand over the crib, looking down at Emma. For a long moment, he was silent, his face unreadable in the dim light from the hallway. Then he spoke so quietly I almost did not hear him. She deserves better than this. The words stung more than I expected. I have given her everything I can. Everything you can, he repeated, turning to face me, but not everything she deserves. We manage, I said stiffly. No more. His tone left no room for argument. This ends now. Fear gripped me. What does that mean? Marco stepped closer, his eyes searching mine. It means that my daughter, our daughter, will have everything she needs. The best schools, the best opportunities, the best protection. Protection. I echoed, the word sending a chill through me. Why would she need protection? A muscle twitched in his jaw. Because she is a Rossi. And what exactly does that mean, Marco? Who are you, really? He was quiet for a moment, weighing his words. My family has interests. Business throughout the country, connections across the world. Business, I said flatly. The kind that requires men like Antonio. The kind that provides for generations, he corrected. The kind that means my daughter will never want for anything. I crossed my arms. And what is the price for that security? His eyes hardened. There is no price when it comes to family. There is always a price, I insisted. And I will not have Emma paying it. Marco stepped closer, his presence suddenly overwhelming in the small room. You do not understand what I am offering you. Both of you. Then explain it to me. A life without struggle. Without. He gestured around the apartment. This. Emma would have everything. The best education, opportunities you cannot even imagine. With you, I said, the implication clear. With us, he corrected. Her family. I shook my head. We don't even know each other, Marco. 3 months over a year ago does not make us family. But Emma does. His voice softened as he glanced back at the crib. She changes everything. I followed his gaze to our sleeping daughter, her tiny chest rising and falling peacefully, unaware of the life-altering conversation happening above her. Could I deny her the advantages Marco was offering? Could I live with myself if I did? I need time, I said finally. It is too much to process at once. Marco nodded slowly. Time, of course. He reached into his jacket pocket, extracting a sleek business card. My private number. Call me tomorrow and we will discuss arrangements. Arrangements? I repeated wearily. For a more suitable living situation, he clarified. Temporary, until we determine a more permanent solution. I took the card, my fingers brushing against his. The brief contact sent an unwelcome jolt through me, memories of those same hands on my skin rushing back. I should go, he said, stepping back. It is late and you both need rest. I walked him to the door, hyper-aware of his presence behind me. At the threshold, he paused, turning back to face me. Sophia, he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. I want you to know. Finding out about Emma, it changes things for me. How? I asked, searching his face for some hint of the man I thought I knew 15 months ago. I have spent my life building something, protecting something that was handed down to me. I never questioned why until now. His eyes met mine, intense and sincere. Now I have something of my own to protect. Before I could respond, he leaned forward, pressing a gentle kiss to my forehead. His sudden movement was entirely unforeseen, clashing so sharply with the perilous energy he radiated that I stood paralyzed where I was. Tomorrow, he stated once more, before pivoting and vanishing into the corridor. I shut the door, engaging the heavy lock, fully aware it offered no genuine defense should Marco choose to come back. My knees turned to jelly. I collapsed onto the floorboards, leaning my spine against the wood, as the reality of the evening's occurrences crashed down on me. Marco had tracked us down. He was aware of Emma, and our lives were irrevocably altered. Exhaustion must have claimed me right there on the ground, for the next moment of awareness came with Emma's wails dragging me from a restless slumber. Daylight poured through the glass, exposing the worn-out nature of our flat with unforgiving brightness. Standing up on stiff limbs, I glimpsed my reflection in the entryway mirror. Pale, messy, with deep shadows beneath my eyes, I looked like a stranger to myself. Emma's demands became louder. I went to her crib, gathering her up and inhaling her fresh baby smell. Good morning, tiny one, I whispered, attempting to sound normal. Did you rest well? While mixing her formula, the previous night's scenes looped in my head. The look on Marco's face when he spotted Emma, the way he said her name, the bond of blood, and the vows of a superior life that felt dangerously like a gilded cage. My mobile vibrated on the countertop, a message from an unrecognized number. I have taken the liberty of organizing a few matters. Antonio will be waiting downstairs at noon. I glared at the screen, feeling a blend of offense and nervousness at his audacity, as though my compliance was guaranteed. I looked around our cramped living space, suddenly viewing it through Marco's perspective, the damp patch expanding on the ceiling, the balding rug, the used furniture I'd scavenged from charity shops. Was this truly the highest standard I could offer Emma? My daughter cooed joyfully in my embrace, unaware of the chaos surrounding her. I kissed her brow, smelling her skin. What is our plan, sweet girl? The morning blurred into a routine of feeding, bathing, and playing on the frayed carpet while my thoughts sprinted through options. I could flee, grab Emma, and vanish. But with what funds, and how far could we actually get before Marco tracked us down? The man possessed means I couldn't even imagine. By 11:30, I was packing a bag with shaking hands. Whatever Marco had set in motion, I had to be ready. Spare nappies, wipes, milk, a fresh outfit for Emma, her beloved plush bunny. I dressed her in her finest clothes, a soft yellow frock with little stitched blossoms that Mrs. Chen had gifted us. For myself, I donned the only dress I possessed that wasn't a work uniform, a basic blue wrap that had seen better days. At exactly 12 o'clock, my phone vibrated once more. We are downstairs. Inhaling deeply, I secured Emma in her carrier and threw the bag over my shoulder. Every step down the staircase felt like a march toward an unavoidable fate. A tide too powerful to fight dragging us into Marco's gravity. On the street, the identical polished black vehicle from the night before was idling at the curb. Antonio was positioned next to it, his massive frame attracting looks from pedestrians. Spotting us, he stood taller and opened the back door. "Ms. Mitchell," he acknowledged with a curt nod. "Mr. Rossi awaits you." I paused at the car's entrance. "Where are we being taken?" Antonio's face was unreadable. "Mr. Rossi will clarify everything." With a heavy sigh, I slid into the vehicle, placing Emma's carrier next to me. To my shock, Marco was absent. In his place sat a woman with glossy dark hair and intelligent eyes, watching me distantly from the facing seat. "Ms. Mitchell," she stated, her voice crisp and businesslike. "I am Diana Vega, Mr. Ross's executive assistant. He instructed me to accompany you today." "Where is he?" I questioned, fastening Emma's seatbelt tight. "Attending to business," Diana answered, her gaze darting to Emma with barely hidden intrigue. "He will meet us later." The sedan glided away from the sidewalk, joining the midday traffic. Diana offered no further details, and my pride prevented me from asking. Instead, I concentrated on Emma, who had drifted off in her seat, happily ignorant of the stress in the air. We traveled for nearly half an hour, trading my humble district for progressively wealthier parts of the metropolis. Eventually, the vehicle turned onto a leafy avenue of grand townhouses, halting in front of one featuring a shiny black door and immaculate white stone. "We have arrived," Diana declared, glancing at her mobile before exiting. Antonio materialized at my door, extending a hand which I disregarded as I carefully removed Emma's carrier. The residence towered over us, 3 levels of quiet opulence that likely cost more than I could earn in several lifetimes. "Mr. Rossi had this estate readied for you," Diana stated, guiding us up the entrance stairs. "It is completely furnished and supplied with all necessities." My stride faltered. "For me? You mean for us to live here?" Diana opened the lock with a modern keycard, signaling for me to go in. "Mr. Rossi believed you might value a more appropriate setting for the infant." The inside of the house took my breath away. Natural light flooded through high windows onto timber floors, lighting up a stylishly appointed living area with ivory furniture and modern art. Fresh blooms rested in a crystal vase on a table that likely cost more than everything in my old flat combined. "The nursery is on the upper level, first door to the right," Diana went on, seemingly unaffected by my shocked muteness. "The pantry has been filled based on the dietary habits observed in your apartment." A shiver went down my spine. "You went into my home." Diana didn't flinch. "A crew was sent this morning to evaluate your requirements and guarantee this move would be as smooth as possible." "I never consented to move," I stammered, recovering my voice. This is madness. Mr. Rossi anticipated you might say that." She pulled an envelope from her bag. "He instructed me to present this to you." I accepted the envelope with shaking hands, moving Emma's carrier to my other side. Inside lay a check containing more zeros than I had ever witnessed, alongside a handwritten note in refined penmanship. "For Emma's future, non-negotiable. We will talk about the rest this evening, Em." My knees suddenly gave out. I collapsed onto the closest armchair, the expensive material feeling alien against my skin. "This is excessive." "Mr. Rossi was explicit that this topic is not up for debate," Diana remarked, checking her timepiece. "The nursery is set up following pediatric guidelines. Your personal items will arrive this afternoon." "My items?" I repeated quietly. "But I didn't pack anything. A team is managing it." Diana headed for the exit. Mr. Rossi will join you for dinner at 7 o'clock. The kitchen is full, or you can order delivery. There is a directory of approved dining establishments by the telephone. Antonio will stay outside for security. Security? I echoed, the term sending a new ripple of fear through me. Are we in peril? Diana's face softened just a fraction. It is simply a safeguard, Ms. Mitchell. Mr. Ross's status requires specific precautions. With that vague explanation, she departed, the lock clicking behind her. I remained motionless for several minutes, the check weighing down my hand. The scale of these events slowly penetrating my mind. Emma shifted in her seat, her small face wrinkling as she roused from her sleep. It's all right, darling, I whispered, gathering her up. Mommy has you. But did I? The foundation beneath me felt increasingly shaky, as though I was being pulled into a tide too strong to swim against. Eventually, curiosity won out over my dread, and with Emma on my hip, I started to investigate our new temporary, I insisted to myself, residence. The kitchen shone with top-tier appliances and stone counters. The fridge was indeed filled with Emma's preferred foods, alongside products I knew from my own meager cupboards, plus luxuries I could never buy. Upstairs, I opened the door to what Diana had termed the nursery, then halted abruptly. The space was a dream in pale yellows and creams, featuring a hand-carved timber crib that must have cost a king's ransom. A soft nursing chair sat in the corner next to shelves packed with stories. A changing station was loaded with nappies, wipes, lotions, all the premium brands I had gazed at in shops before buying the store brand. How did he accomplish this overnight? I breathed to Emma, who wiggled in my grasp, reaching for a mobile of fine fabric butterflies spinning above the bed. The neighboring room unveiled a master suite with a massive bed covered in rich fabrics. The ensuite bathroom boasted a deep soaking tub and a shower with more controls than I understood. My humble toiletries would look ridiculously out of place there. As predicted, around 3 o'clock, a squad of efficient workers showed up with cartons holding our possessions. They operated with tactical exactness, putting my garments into the walk-in wardrobe, organizing Emma's playthings in the nursery, and placing my few personal trinkets around the house to fabricate the sense that we had always lived there. I observed in confused silence, Emma napping on my shoulder. When they were done, one handed me a fresh mobile device. Mr. Rossi requires you to utilize this, he stated. For security reasons. I took it hesitantly, leaving it on a side table. As the crew left, the quiet of the townhouse swallowed us, interrupted only by Emma's gentle breaths and the rhythmic ticking of an old clock. The time until 7 dragged on forever. I washed Emma in the nursery's specially sized bath, amazed at how quickly she adapted to the new environment, gurgling and splashing with joy. After dressing her in clean clothes from her new collection, all her size, all high-end labels, I gave her dinner in a high chair that seemed custom-built. At exactly 5 minutes to 7, a gentle rap sounded at the door. My heart jumped into my throat. Taking a steadying breath, I placed Emma in her playpen and went to answer. Marco was at the entrance, perfectly attired in another bespoke suit, his dark hair slightly wet as if he had just showered. His gaze swept past me, assessing the inside of the home before locking onto my eyes. "May I enter?" he requested. The courtesy clashed with the reality that he technically owned the property. I moved aside, granting him access. He walked with that identical smooth elegance I recalled. His presence instantly dominating the area in a way that made the spacious rooms feel suddenly cramped. "Where is Emma?" he inquired, his tone gentler when saying our daughter's name. "In the lounge," I answered, guiding him there. Emma glanced up from her enclosure, her dark eyes so similar to Marco's, widening at the appearance of a newcomer. For a second, I worried she might wail, but instead she flashed a toothless grin, lifting her chubby arms. Marco stood stock still, visibly shaken by this easy sign of welcome. He glanced at me, hesitation flickering across his face. "You can hold her," I offered, startled by my own permission. She is usually friendly with strangers. With a tenderness that contradicted. With his imposing stature dominating the room, Marco lifted Emma from the confines of her playpen. He cradled her with extreme care, handling her as though she were constructed of the most fragile glass. Emma reached upward, her tiny hand patting his cheek with a sense of innocent curiosity. "Ciao, Piccola," he murmured, his accent thickening with the weight of his emotions. "I am your papa." The sheer intimacy of the moment forced me to look away, an unexpected lump forming in my throat. When I finally glanced back, Marco was watching me, his expression completely unreadable. "We need to talk," he stated. I nodded, gesturing toward the dining room where I had already noticed a table set for two. "I assume you have arranged dinner," I said. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Of course." As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Marco did not move, continuing to hold Emma close against him, so I went to answer it. A professional catering team entered, efficiently setting up an elaborate meal on the dining table before departing just as silently as they had arrived. Marco settled Emma into the high chair positioned between our seats, his movements surprisingly natural for someone who had only just met his child. He pulled out my chair with his free hand, the gesture feeling oddly formal in the midst of our surreal situation. "You have been busy," I remarked as we sat, nodding toward the lavish spread of Italian dishes. "All of this in less than a day," he noted. "When something is important, you do not waste time," he replied, his eyes fixed on Emma as she babbled happily, reaching for a piece of soft bread from her tray. "She seems comfortable here." "Babies adapt quickly," I said. "It does not mean this is right." Marco's eyes flicked to mine. "What would be right, Sophia? That cramped apartment? The neighborhood where police sirens are a nightly lullaby?" I bristled at his dismissal. "It was all I could afford. I have done my best." "I know you have," he said, his tone softening. "But now you do not have to do it alone." "What exactly are you proposing, Marco?" "That we play house. Pretend to be a family. I don't even know who you really are," I added. He was quiet for a moment, absently helping Emma grasp her sippy cup. "What do you want to know?" "The truth," I said firmly. "Starting with what you do for a living that requires armed guards and security measures." Marco sighed, setting down his fork. "My family has been in certain businesses for generations. Import-export primarily, along with real estate, construction, and waste management." "That sounds legitimate enough," I said skeptically. "So why all the security?" "Because not all of our competitors play by the rules," he replied, his voice hardening. "And because the Rossi name carries certain expectations." The implication of his words hung heavily in the air between us. I was not naive. I had seen enough movies and read enough news stories to recognize the euphemisms, the armed guards, the immediate resources, and the way people deferred to him. It all painted a picture I had been trying to deny since the moment I saw him at Bellini's. "You are in the Mafia," I said flatly, my voice barely rising above a whisper. Marco did not flinch. "I prefer to think of it as a family business with traditional values and methods." "Traditional methods," I repeated, a humorless laugh escaping me. "Is that what we are calling it?" His expression remained calm, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "Judge me if you must, Sophia, but understand this: everything I do, everything my family has built, is about protection and provision. We take care of our own." Emma banged her sippy cup against her tray, entirely oblivious to the tension crackling between her parents. Marco's expression softened as he glanced at her, gently wiping a smudge of food from her cheek with his napkin. "And now," I asked, my throat tight, "what does this mean for her? For us?" "It means she will never want for anything," Marco said firmly. "It means she will be protected, educated, and given every advantage in your world," I countered. "A world of what? Violence? Illegal activities?" Marco's jaw tightened. "My world is not so different from yours, Sophia. There are rules, and there are consequences for breaking them. The difference is that I have the power to ensure those rules are followed." I shook my head, trying to process the enormity of what he was saying. "I don't want Emma exposed to danger. I don't want her growing up surrounded by bodyguards and whatever else comes with being a Rossi. And I do not want my daughter growing up in poverty when I can provide her with everything," he countered, his voice taking on a sharp edge. "Do you think I would ever let anything happen to her? To you?" The possessiveness in his tone sent a shiver down my spine, half fear, half something else I did not want to examine too closely. You have given us a beautiful home, I acknowledged, gesturing around us. But at what cost? What do you expect in return, Marco? His eyes darkened. Is it so hard to believe I simply want to know my daughter? To be part of her life? And me? I pressed. What do you want from me? Marco was silent for a long moment, his gaze never leaving mine. I want what I have always wanted since the moment I met you, Sophia. You. The directness of his answer startled me. You barely know me. I knew enough to spend 3 months with you, he countered. To think about you every day after you disappeared. I scoffed. If that were true, you would have looked for me. I did. His response was immediate, his tone hard. When I returned from Naples and found you gone, no note, no forwarding address, I had my people search. But you had left no trace. You changed your phone number, even your job. The revelation stunned me. You looked for me. Of course I did. A muscle twitched in his jaw. Do you think I make a habit of becoming involved with women, then simply forgetting them? I don't know what to think, I admitted. You never told me who you really were. What your business entailed. Would you have stayed if you knew? He challenged. The question gave me pause. Would I have? The Marco I had known had been charming, attentive, and mysterious in a way that had been exciting rather than alarming. But if I had known the truth? I don't know, I answered honestly. Emma began to fuss, her little face scrunching up in the way that meant she was getting tired. Without thinking, I rose to take her from the high chair, but Marco was faster, lifting her with a gentleness that continued to surprise me. May I? He asked, already cradling her against his chest. I have missed so much already. I nodded, watching as he began to pace slowly around the room, murmuring to Emma in Italian. Despite everything, the sight tugged at something deep in my chest. This dangerous man holding our daughter with such tenderness, his voice soft as he spoke to her in his native tongue. What are you telling her? I asked. Marco glanced up, a rare smile softening his features. That she is beautiful. That she has her mother's spirit. That I will never let anything hurt her. Emma's eyelids were growing heavy, her little head nestling against Marco's shoulder as she fought sleep. He continued his slow circuit of the room, his movements fluid and practiced, as if he had been soothing babies to sleep his entire life instead of whatever it was he actually did. You are good with her, I admitted reluctantly. Children know when they are loved, he replied simply. It is the purest form of understanding. I watched them together, my emotions a tangled mess. Part of me wanted to grab Emma and run far away from Marco and the dangerous world he represented. Another part, a part one was less comfortable acknowledging, recognized that he could give her things I never could. Security. Opportunities. A father who clearly already adored her. Where do we go from here? I asked finally. Marco looked up, his dark eyes meeting mine. That depends on what you want, Sophia. What I want. I echoed, surprised by the difference in his tone. I thought this was all non-negotiable. The fact that I will be part of Emma's life is non-negotiable, he clarified. How we arrange that is flexible. Emma had finally surrendered to sleep. Her tiny body relaxed against Marco's shoulder. He moved to the nursery with practiced ease, and I followed, watching as he gently laid her in the crib, tucking her favorite blanket around her. He stood looking down at her for a long moment, an expression of wonder on his face. We could make this work, he said quietly, still watching our sleeping daughter. The three of us. As what? I asked, equally quiet. Co-parents. Roommates. Marco turned to face me, his eyes intense in the dim light of the nursery. As a family. A real one. My heart skipped a beat. You can't be serious. I have never been more serious about anything in my life, he said, taking a step toward me. Marry me, Sophia. The proposal, if one could call such a statement a proposal, knocked the breath from my lungs. Marco, this is insane. We barely know each other. We made a child together, he countered. And despite what you may think, I remember everything about those 3 months. The way you take your coffee. How you hum when you are thinking. The birthmark on your left hip. Heat rushed to my face at the intimate reminder. Physical attraction isn't a basis for marriage. No, he agreed. But it is not a hindrance, either. His expression turned serious. I am not proposing out of obligation, Sophia. I want this. I want you. Both of you. And if I say no? Something shifted in his eyes. Not anger, but resolution. Then we work out a different arrangement. But Emma is a Rossi. That is not negotiable. The underlying message was clear. One way or another, he would be part of our lives. The only question was whether I would be on the inside of his world or constantly fighting to keep Emma from being pulled into it. I need time, I said finally. This is too much to process all at once. Marco nodded slowly. Of course. Take the time you need. He glanced at his watch. I have some business to attend to, but I will return tomorrow. Perhaps we could take Emma to the park. Do something normal. The suggestion of such an ordinary family activity from a man who was anything but ordinary nearly made me laugh. Instead, I nodded, walking with him back toward the front door. At the threshold, Marco paused, turning back to face me. One thing you should know, Sophia. I meant what I said about protection. Antonio will remain outside, and there are other security measures in place for your safety and Emma's. Are we in danger? I asked, the question that had been nagging at me since Diana's cryptic comments earlier. Marco's expression hardened. Not if I have anything to say about it. But my position comes with complications. People who would use my family against me. And now that includes us, I said, the reality of it sinking in. Yes. He reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from my face with unexpected gentleness. But I promise you this. Nothing will harm you or Emma while I draw breath. The intensity of his vow should have frightened me. Instead, I found myself believing him despite everything. Whatever else Marco Rossi might be, his devotion to his newfound family seemed absolutely genuine. After he left, I walked through the townhouse in a daze, taking in the luxury that now surrounded us. The soft carpet beneath my feet, the expensive furniture, the silence that felt so different from the noise of my old apartment. It was a golden cage, perhaps, but for the first time since Emma was born, I didn't feel the crushing weight of survival pressing down on me. I felt something else entirely, a strange mix of apprehension and safety, bound together by the promise of a man I barely knew, yet who had claimed us as his own with a certainty that terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. State-of-the-art kitchen. All of it represented a life I'd never imagined for myself. A life Emma could have if I accepted Marco's proposition. But at what cost? I checked on Emma one last time before retiring to the master bedroom. She slept peacefully, her tiny chest rising and falling, her dark lashes resting against her cheeks. She looked so innocent, so untouched by the complications that now surrounded her very existence. What should we do, little one? I whispered, though I knew she couldn't answer. What's the right choice here? Sleep eluded me that night, despite the impossibly comfortable bed. I tossed and turned, my mind racing with possibilities, fears, and memories of the time Marco and I had shared before. Memories that seemed to belong to a different life entirely. Morning came too quickly. Sunlight streaming through curtains I hadn't closed properly. I checked the baby monitor. Emma was still sleeping, exhausted from the previous day's excitement. Taking advantage of the rare quiet moment, I slipped downstairs to make coffee. The kitchen, with its gleaming countertops and professional-grade appliances, still felt like a movie set rather than a place I belonged. I located the coffee maker, far more complicated than necessary, and managed to brew a cup, carrying it to the window that overlooked a small, perfectly manicured garden. The peaceful scene was marred only by the presence of Antonio, standing vigilant by the gate. Security, Marco had called it, protection, but it felt more like a gilded cage. My phone, the new one Marco had provided, chimed with a message. Expecting Marco, I was surprised to see Mia's name instead. Where are you? Missed your shift yesterday and today. Manager is pissed. Everything okay? Reality crashed back like a cold wave. In the whirlwind of the past 2 days, I'd completely forgotten about my job at Bellini's. The job that, meager as it was, had kept a roof over our heads and food on the table. I started to type a response, then stopped. What could I say? That I'd suddenly moved into a luxury townhouse courtesy of the mafia boss who'd fathered my child? That my entire life had been upended in the space of 48 hours? Before I could decide, another message appeared on the screen. This one from Marco. Good morning. Car will arrive at 10 to take us to the park, weather permitting. Is that agreeable? The formality of it made me smile despite myself. I typed back a simple yes, then set the phone aside, my mind still spinning with the impossible choice before me. The crux of it was simple. I could resist Marco's influence in our lives, fighting an uphill battle against a man with resources I couldn't begin to match. Or I could accept his proposal, or some version of it, allowing Emma to grow up with all the advantages he could provide, but tied to a world I still didn't fully understand or trust. Emma's cries through the baby monitor interrupted my thoughts. I headed upstairs, finding her standing in her crib, her little face brightening when she saw me. Good morning, sunshine, I said, lifting her into my arms. Did you sleep well in your fancy new bed? She babbled happily in response, seemingly already adjusted to our new surroundings. Children adapt quickly, I reminded myself. But was adaptation always the right choice? As I changed and dressed Emma, preparing her for our outing with Marco, one thought kept circling in my mind. Whatever decision I made would irrevocably shape my daughter's future. And while I could pretend otherwise, the truth was that Marco Rossi had already fundamentally altered our lives simply by walking back into them. The question now was how much further I would allow him in. At precisely 10 o'clock, a sleek black SUV pulled up outside the townhouse. I watched from the window as Marco emerged, dressed more casually than I'd ever seen him, dark jeans and a grey cashmere sweater that somehow made him look both more approachable and even more handsome. The contradiction wasn't lost on me. I dressed Emma in a pale yellow sundress with tiny white flowers, her dark curls tamed with a matching headband. For myself, I'd chosen simple jeans and a blue blouse, items from my own wardrobe rather than anything that might have appeared in the closet overnight. Ready to go see your daddy? I whispered to Emma, the word still strange on my tongue. She bounced in my arms, excited by the prospect of an outing, regardless of who it was with. Marco's face lit up when I opened the door, his eyes immediately finding Emma. Good morning, he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. You look beautiful, both of you. I nodded, suddenly shy in the face of this more casual, more personal version of Marco. The park sounds nice. Emma loves the swings. Then swings she shall have, he replied with a smile that transformed his usually serious face. The car ride was surprisingly comfortable. Emma babbling happily between us in her car seat. Marco listened to her with rapt attention, responding as if her incoherent sounds were the most fascinating conversation he'd ever had. She's very verbal for her age, he observed proudly. She started early, I agreed. The doctor says she's advanced in her development. Marco nodded, his expression turning serious. I'd like to meet her doctor, review her medical records. The request reminded me sharply of the reality of our situation. Marco. It's not negotiable, Sophia, he said, though his tone remained gentle. I need to know everything about my daughter's health and development. I've missed 6 months already. I sighed, knowing this was a battle I wouldn't win. Fine, I'll set up an appointment. He smiled, clearly pleased with my acquiescence. Thank you. The park was busy with families enjoying the beautiful weather, children running and playing while parents watched from benches. As we stepped out of the car, I noticed Antonio and another man I didn't recognize positioning themselves discreetly at opposite ends of the playground. Is that really necessary? I asked, nodding toward the security. Marco's expression hardened slightly. Always. He carried Emma to the swings, settling her into one of the baby swings with a gentleness that continued to surprise me. She squealed with delight as he pushed her, her little legs kicking excitedly. She loves it, he said, his face alight with wonder at this simple discovery about his daughter. I watched them together, my heart constricting with emotions I couldn't fully name. Marco Rossi, the intimidating figure who commanded respect with just a look, was completely captivated by this tiny being we had created. There was something disarming about seeing this side of him, the father, rather than the feared boss. We spent over an hour at the park. Marco insisted on trying every baby-appropriate piece of equipment with Emma. She responded to his attention with uninhibited joy, clearly enchanted by this new person who looked at her as if she were the center of the universe. "She likes you," I observed as we sat on a bench, Emma dozing against Marco's chest after all the excitement. "Of course she does," he replied with unexpected humor. "She's a Rossi. Family is everything to us." I studied his face as he gazed down at our sleeping daughter. "Is that why you want to marry me? Because of family?" Marco's eyes lifted to mine, their darkness intense even in the bright sunlight. "I want to marry you because the thought of not having both of you in my life is unacceptable." "That's not exactly romantic," I pointed out. A small smile played at the corner of his mouth. "Would you prefer romance, Sophia? Flowers, candlelight? I can arrange those things if that's what you want." "I want honesty," I replied. "Whatever else happens between us, I need that." Marco nodded slowly. "Fair enough." He shifted Emma gently in his arms. "The truth is, I have thought about you every day since you disappeared. I told myself it was anger that kept you in my thoughts. Anger that you'd left without a word. But when I saw you at Bellini's..." He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "It was like finding something I didn't even know I'd lost." The raw honesty in his voice caught me off guard. "Marco." And then to discover Emma, he continued, looking down at our sleeping daughter. "To learn that while I was searching for you, you were bringing my child into the world alone." His jaw tightened. "I should have been there." "You couldn't have known," I said softly. "I should have looked harder," he insisted. "My resources." There's no excuse for not finding you sooner. The intensity of his self-recrimination surprised me. "We can't change the past." "No," he agreed, meeting my eyes again. "But we can shape the future. Our future." I looked away, overwhelmed by the certainty in his gaze. "It's not that simple." "It can be," he countered. "Say yes, Sophia. Let me take care of you both, protect you, give you the life you deserve." "And if I say no?" I asked, the question that had been haunting me. Marco was quiet for a long moment, his hand gently stroking Emma's back as she slept. "Then we find an arrangement that works. Shared custody, perhaps. You would still have the townhouse, financial support, security, whatever you need. But," his eyes met mine, unflinching, "I will be part of Emma's life. That's non-negotiable." I nodded, having expected as much. "And us? What happens to whatever this is between us?" Marco reached out, his free hand covering mine on the bench between us. "That would be up to you, Sophia. I've made my feelings clear. The rest would be your choice." The warmth of his hand on mine sent an unwelcome flutter through my chest. Despite everything, the danger he represented, the complications he brought into our lives, I couldn't deny the attraction that still simmered between us, as potent now as it had been 15 months ago. Emma stirred against Marco's chest, her little face scrunching as she woke from her nap. The moment between us broken, I reached for her, settling her in my lap as she blinked sleepily at the world around her. "We should get her home," I said. "She'll be hungry soon." Marco nodded, standing and offering his hand to help me up. The simple gesture felt oddly formal after the intimacy of our conversation, but I accepted it, balancing Emma on my hip as we walked back toward the car. The rest of the day passed in a strange domestic blur, feeding Emma, playing with her, watching as Marco absorbed every detail of her routine with an almost obsessive attention. He insisted on giving her a bath, his sleeves rolled up as he carefully supported her in the water, his face alight with wonder at her delighted splashing. "I've negotiated million-dollar deals with less tension than this," he commented as he struggled to dress a wiggling Emma in her pajamas. I laughed despite myself. Welcome to parenthood. By the time we'd settled Emma for the night, a comfortable exhaustion had settled over me. The past few days had been an emotional whirlwind, and the weight of the decisions before me pressed heavily on my mind. "Stay," Marco said softly as we stood in the hallway outside the nursery. "Have dinner with me. Talk." I hesitated, then nodded. "All right." Unlike the previous night's elaborate catered meal, Marco led me to the kitchen, rolling up his sleeves again. "I'll cook," he announced. "It's been too long since I made a proper meal." "You know how to cook?" I asked, unable to conceal my surprise. He cast me an amused look. "My mother insisted that all her children learn. She used to say, 'A man who cannot feed himself is no man at all.'" I sat on a stool at the kitchen island, observing as Marco moved with unexpected efficiency around the space, collecting ingredients from the fully stocked refrigerator and pantry. "Tell me about your family," I requested, realizing how little I actually knew about this man who wished to become my husband. Marco's hands paused briefly in their work. "My father was John Carlo Rossi. He built our family's business from scratch after we arrived in America. My mother, Elalina, was his strength, the heart of our family." A shadow passed over his face. "They are both gone now." "I'm sorry," I said softly. He nodded, resuming his chopping. "I have 2 younger brothers. Luca runs our operations on the West Coast. Matteo manages our legitimate businesses, construction, real estate, the restaurant chain." "And you?" I asked. "What do you manage?" His eyes met mine, dark and indecipherable. "Everything else." The simple answer sent a chill down my spine, a reminder of what lay beneath the surface of this surprisingly domestic scene. "And your family?" he asked, shifting the subject. "You have never mentioned them." I shrugged, the familiar ache dulled by years of acceptance. "There isn't much to tell. My mother left when I was 7. My father did his best, but he drank himself to death by the time I was 16. After that, I was on my own." Marco's expression hardened. "Foster care." "For a while," I acknowledged, "until I aged out." He was silent for a moment, his knife stilling on the cutting board. "No wonder you are so fiercely independent," he said finally. "You have never had anyone to rely on but yourself." The simple observation, delivered without pity, struck a chord within me. "I have managed." "You have," he agreed, his eyes meeting mine across the counter. "But you don't have to anymore, Sophia. That is what I am trying to tell you." The meal he prepared was delicious, a simple pasta with a sauce that tasted of sun-ripened tomatoes and fresh herbs. We ate at the kitchen island rather than the formal dining room, the setting somehow making the conversation flow more easily. Marco told me stories of his childhood in Italy before his family moved to America, summers in Naples, his grandmother's cooking, the traditions his mother had insisted on maintaining even after they had settled in the States. I found myself laughing at his tales of mischief with his brothers, seeing glimpses of a life far more normal than I had imagined. In turn, I shared bits of my own history, the better parts at least, my dreams of going to college someday, my love of art that I had never had time to pursue, the plans I had held for Emma's future before our world had been turned upside down. "You can still have those things," Marco said, reaching across the table to take my hand. "College, art, whatever you want. I can make it happen." The ease with which he offered to fulfill dreams I had long set aside was both tempting and unsettling. "Just like that." "Just like that," he confirmed, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. "Say the word and it is yours." I withdrew my hand slowly. "And what is the price for these dreams, Marco?" His expression sobered. "Not everything I offer comes with a price, Sophia." "Doesn't it though?" I challenged. "If I say yes to you, to this life, what exactly am I agreeing to? Being the wife of a what? A mafia boss? What does that even mean?" Marco was quiet for a long moment. "It means being the most protected woman in the city. It means never wanting for anything. It means giving Emma a family. Not just a father, but uncles, cousins, a legacy." "A legacy of what?" I pressed. His eyes hardened. "Power, respect, loyalty, the values that have kept my family strong for generations." "And the cost?" I insisted. "The danger, the violence. Can you honestly tell me those won't touch our lives? Touch Emma's life?" "I can promise you this," Marco said, his voice low and intense. "No harm will ever come to you or Emma while I draw breath. My world has its dangers, yes, but there is no safer place within it than by my side." The conviction in his voice was absolute. And despite everything, I believed him. Whatever else Marco Rossi might be, his determination to protect what he considered his was beyond question. I need you to understand something, Sophia, he continued, holding my gaze. I am not asking you to accept or participate in the darker aspects of my business. That world would remain separate from our family life. Your only concern would be raising our daughter and making a home with me. A gilded cage is still a cage, Marco. Is it a cage to be loved, protected, to want for nothing? He challenged. Is it a cage to give our daughter everything we never had? The question hung in the air between us, impossible to dismiss. I thought of my own childhood, the instability, the poverty, the constant struggle. Then I looked around at the beautiful home Emma now had. I thought of the opportunities Marco could provide her, the security of never having to worry about where her next meal would come from or if we would have a roof over our heads. I am not asking for your answer tonight, Marco said, his voice gentling. Take the time you need. Get to know me, the real me, not just what you think you know. His reasonableness made it harder to maintain my resistance. This Marco, the one who cooked dinner and bathed our daughter with such tenderness, was dangerously easy to imagine a future with. 1 week, I found myself saying. Give me 1 week to see what this life would be like, to get to know you. Then I will give you my answer. Marco's eyes lit with triumph, though he quickly masked it. 1 week, he agreed, reaching for my hand again. And Sophia? Yes. His fingers tightened around mine. I intend to convince you that saying yes will be the best decision you have ever made.